The next speaker, also the last respondent, Marc Tutors. You're still... oh, a little bit of luck for your presentation. Marc Tutors, I'm going to briefly introduce you. Lecturer in New Media and Digital Culture at the University of Amsterdam, with most notably a PhD on the idea of location as historically mapped and developed by artists and technologists and philosophers as a remedy to deleterious effects of networks. And I hope that you can tell us a bit more about that. He's also a lecturer in political philosophy to new media theory and American politics. Am I correct? Many things. I can't keep up with you entirely. I'm happy to have you. Please give it up for Marc Tutors.
Thank you. Do you want to switch over?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Can I just sort of freestyle it? I don't have a presentation. I just have some thoughts. I actually have one concept that I would like to talk about, but maybe I should try to situate myself and why I'm here, or why I was invited. Let me see. I haven't really done much media art for quite some years, but my first kind of involvement with Impakt Festival, which was in 2003, was at the time when I was working on media art, and at the time I sort of developed a concept with the person who I was working with at the time. We did a collaboration, we did an installation, we borrowed some hardware from the Vaug Society, and we made a kind of we annotated space, and we called it locative media. And I haven't really done anything like that for some years because I've been working on a PhD. I haven't actually got the PhD. I invite you all. I don't have a project to invite you to, but I do have a defense that I could invite you to. So I have the aula, which is in it's a kind of a church in the center of Amsterdam, and assuming that the committee lets me through, which I still haven't heard yet, then it'll be on the 28th of October. You're all welcome, 1 o'clock. Please be my guest. I have the whole space, so I have to fill it up with people. And the PhD was basically inspired by the kind of problems that I encountered in the art practice to some extent, having to do with the sort of problem of location in a networked age. That's the subtitle of the PhD. What does it mean? What does location mean? Because the work that I did defined location very kind of explicitly as your sort of XYZ coordinate position on a map determined through GPS positioning. But that wasn't really satisfactory. And so I kind of went on a long journey that took me through all kinds of aspects of philosophy and different sort of ideas of mapping. How do you map yourself in relation to what is the big picture? Is the big picture the globe? Is the big picture something else, some kind of a political system? Maybe you're not concerned with the big picture. Maybe you just want to know where you are in relation to local things. What are local things? Are they actually like places? Could they be objects? Are those objects really local? I mean, they don't exactly come from that place. They were made somewhere. There was labor that went into them, and so on. And so you can imagine it goes on to the extent of a PhD. So that took me quite a long time. And so then I did one thing that I can respond to in relation to this last comment about sort of tactical media. I don't think that locative media really had much of a politics as opposed to tactical media, which it clearly has a politics. And so it kind of ran into some trouble for that reason, and it kind of got, some people say that it got kind of appropriated, and I would tend to agree with that assessment. But there was one sort of concept that was often kind of came up amongst locative media artists, and it still does, although I'm not sure that that there are kind of good arguments why it may not be the most appropriate concept, and that is situationism. And I'll come back to that, because the concept that I want to talk about is the concept of the situation, and I would like to ask you guys in a moment what that means. What does situation mean? But first of all, I just wanted to address a point that came to mind when Eric was talking. The last piece of locative media that I did in my short kind of career was a piece that did go offline. Actually, it was an art satellite, and it wasn't actually in outer space. It was a blimp, and you could kind of communicate with the blimp and download files from that thing, and it was a sort of autonomous network. Anyway, so then I would like to ask you that question about about situation. What is if anybody could just volunteer to me, what are some thoughts that come to mind when you hear the word situation? What does that word mean to us? Situation.
Conflict, maybe?
Conflict, yeah, I would say so. You, Eric, you mentioned situation a second ago in relation to the making do thing. Like, we got a situation here. So that's a kind of an unusual event. Something out of the ordinary, something that we have to deal with immediately.
So moment?
A moment, sort of a moment in time that is somehow not in the kind of the sort of flow of all the other moments. Anything else?
Context that determines a set of rules.
Yeah, okay, so context in terms of like, where am I in relation to this? That can be thought of spatially, that can be thought of more kind of conceptually. So yeah, those are, and then of course I mentioned situationism, which is kind of another term that I think most of us probably are relatively familiar with. The Situationist International, or a group of very, very well-known, perhaps too well-known artists originally from the 50s. I think they kind of ended in the early 70s. Originally a very marginal group of artists, kind of like media artists are in a way, or at least have been in a way. And they came up with some tactics that were based on this concept of the situation. That was the sort of central principle around which their whole project was based. They actually referred to it as the constructed situation. And it sort of is, it is best understood in the context of the time, which was a very kind of different time than the one that we live in now, and in relation to the whole kind of political project that they were deeply and increasingly involved with over the course of their kind of time. And perhaps it's not wise in the amount of time that we have to go into that, but let's sort of suffice to say that it was very much an idea that was related to space, to physical space, and making kind of freeing up spaces. And it is a concept that has been built on and developed. Also, it was itself built on and developed from, but it has been built on and developed by many kind of sort of famous and notorious cultural theorists as the basis of some of their thought as well. And not to mention artists. It's in fact, some people would even claim that the kind of conventional move in contemporary art is basically a kind of a remix kind of version of situationism. For example, relational aesthetics is a kind of very popular concept in contemporary art some years ago. In many ways can be perhaps thought of as reworking some of their ideas. So I was asked to put some, can we switch over? Okay. So these are images that the internet gives us for situationism. From Thiago, from your presentation, when you were talking about I wrote it down here, that event in Praça de Estação, and many others, they were making a kind of a beach on the street. That's a very situationist concept, as you may know. One of their famous slogans was that there is a beach underneath the street, which is actually true in Holland, strangely enough. So they became very popular in the 60s, in the sort of May '68 movement, and their slogans were written on throughout the street when there was this kind of eruption of kind of the imagination as a kind of a form of protest, which confused the sort of left wing at the time and created a kind of strange split between the sort of new generation and the kind of old guard of the political left. And they have their sort of the situationists are held up amongst many kind of critical media theorists and theorists in general as representing a kind of a high watermark for like engaged. There's that beach is the street thing right there. Very small though. A kind of a high watermark for engaged like the unity of theory and practice, the concept, the sort of central concept, one of the central concepts in that flavor of Marxism. And so they're still sort of held up today as being that the sort of the high watermark, and everything that uses their concepts, every form that comes after and uses their concept is often critiqued in relation to the situationists who did it correctly. And sometimes some theorists will sort of claim that we have to go back to this state, really. For example, Mackenzie Wark is a kind of a representative of that sort of school of thought. That may be, to me it seems like a kind of a nostalgic baby boom type sort of approach that sort of holds up this one period in history as being sort of where it all went wrong, and that we have to, and I don't know that you can necessarily kind of go back in any case. Also, there are kind of weird appropriations of situationism that are very effective. For example, and some dispute whether or not this is in fact accurate, there is, perhaps some of you know about the I don't know, he's like a brigadier general in the Israeli Defense Force who claims to have used the ideas of Guy Debord and situationism to develop new military tactics for making incursions into the occupied territories. So there's arguably no kind of politics that are necessarily clearly associated with these tactics. They can sort of be used in different ways, so there's that. I have another form of situation. There's situational awareness. Situational awareness, a little bit like what Arjen was saying here. There are all these images of different kinds of situational awareness. The kind that I was thinking of when I thought of situational awareness, it's a little bit lower down here. It's more this type of situational awareness. It's a kind of a term of art. I think at this point it's been taken up by the looks of it by the sort of poster sort of office culture. But initially it was a sort of a term of art for, similar to the full spectrum dominance idea, a term of art in the military referring to the awareness, total awareness of your environment, being able to see through walls, being able to know where you are. And indeed, you know, locative media is built on GPS and other many of the technologies that we use are built in some sense on reappropriated military technologies, and so there's kind of a relationship always, whenever you're working with technology, to some sort of a military infrastructure that should be borne in mind. And so I think that I'm sort of building up concepts here that may be in relation to the kind of work that we're looking at. Another one is the situation. I don't know if you know this guy. I only saw the beginning of this series, but he's a reality TV star known for his fabulous abdominal muscles, which he refers to as the situation. And I think that if you're doing any kind of work with media, you know, you need to sort of have a certain kind of awareness of popular culture, the way that memes work, in order to get your sort of work out there and to get attention. And I'm pretty much at the end here. The last situation I have is the situation room. Situation room is this kind of, I guess, a bit more like the conventional notion of the situation. We have a situation, we've got to deal with it. This is a crisis. Our society, and arguably the kind of mode of capitalism that we're in, is kind of always driven forward by crisis. You have a kind of a crisis, and then when a crisis happens, all kinds of crazy shit gets sort of snuck in through the door because it's a crisis and there's no time to talk. And it's also arguably how new media works, actually. You know, if you want to get attention, then a crisis is going to get attention. And so that's been argued recently in certain media theory that is kind of the logic of new media as opposed to other forms of media. So those are the kind of modes of situation that I wanted to sort of present as in dialogue, I think, with the what I saw in Thiago's work. I don't know if this is a kind of to your credit or if this is a criticism. I think it can be both at the same time. And that's basically it. I'd like to thank you guys for inviting me, and I'll just stand here if you have any questions.
Thank you for some interesting remarks on also on the language behind many of the aspects that we've been talking about. Is there maybe a first comment or thought from the audience? then we might just remind you that the bar is still open in the meantime, and we'll have a little switch over and sit down with the milk company that we have here tonight and myself to add some thoughts and discuss the issues a bit more. So let's have a seat, and if you guys want a drink in the meantime, go and fetch it. We'll just switch over.